probably concluding chapter 3 of part 7. Now learn the parable from the fig tree and all the trees. When already its branch has become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. Thus also, when ye shall see all these things, know that the kingdom of God is near, at the doors. I assuredly say to you, this race shall not pass away until all these things be done. But concerning that day and hour knows no one, not the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. But as the days of Noah, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. For as they were in the days which were before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took all away. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planting, they were building. But on the day Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven, and destroyed them all. Thus shall be also in the day when the Son of Man shall be revealed. I tell you that in that night there shall be two in one bed. One shall be taken and the other left. Then there shall be two in the field. One shall be taken and one left. Two grinding at the mill. One shall be taken and one left. Look to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be oppressed with surfeiting and drunkenness and anxious cares of this life, and so that day may come on you unawares. For as a snare it shall come on all those who dwell on the face of all the earth. Watch then, and at every season pray, that you may be considered worthy to escape all the things about to come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. For you know not when the time is, but know this, that if the householder had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken into. On this account, do you be ready also, for in an hour, when you do not think it, the Son of Man comes. And the, one at the mill, one at the bed, one at whatever, perhaps it's something that's done to them. And I understand how rapture doctrines were part of this, but what if, it's something internal or external that happens to these people, and some survive it, some don't. But the point is, they're both in the same outer situation, you could say, but it takes one of them and doesn't take the other one. Maybe they take in the same thing, or the same thing is put into them. Peter broke in with, Lord, do you speak this parable to us, or even to all? Well, prophets didn't have secret doctrine. They may have advised people personally, but, they didn't have secret doctrine that wasn't, it's like, well, it's like it was revealed to me, I'll give it to you, but other people don't get, right? Jesus replied, what I say to you, I say to all, watch. It is as a man taking a far journey, who, leaving his house, gave authority to his slaves, and each man his work, and commanded the gatekeeper to watch. Who then is the faithful and wise slave, whom the Lord will make ruler over his household, to give them the food in season? Happy slave that, whom his Lord coming shall find doing so. I assuredly say to you, that he shall make him ruler over all his possessions. But if the bad slave shall say in his heart, my lord delays, and shall begin to strike his fellow slaves, and eat and drink with the drunken, the lord of that slave shall come on a day which he expects not, and in an hour that he knows not, and shall cut him in two, and give him his part with the hypocrites. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now that slave who knew his Lord's will, and prepared not, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten much. But he who knew not and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few. For whom much is given, of him much shall be required. And to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. Watch therefore, for you know not what day your Lord comes, whether at even or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning, lest the coming suddenly he find you sleeping. Then the kingdom of the heavens shall be likened to 10 virgins, who having taken their lamps, went forth to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 prudent. For the foolish, having taken lamps, took no oil with them, but the prudent took oil in the vessels with their lamps. But the bridegroom delaying, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was made, Behold, the bridegroom! Go out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose, and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the prudent, Give us of your oil, for our lamps are gone out. But the prudent answered, saying, Lest there be not enough for us and you, go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Afterwards came also the other virgins, saying, Sir, sir, open to us. But he answering said, I assuredly say to you, I do not know you. Think of Matthew 7:21 to 23. Let your loins be girded about, and your lamps burning, and yourselves like men waiting for the Lord, when he will return from the wedding, that, when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately. Happy slaves they whom the Lord coming shall find watching. I assuredly say to you that he shall gird himself and make them recline, and will come near and serve them. And if he shall come in the 2nd watch or in the 3rd watch, and find them thus, happy are they. Watch therefore, for ye know neither the day nor the hour. And when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all the nations, and he shall separate them from one another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will place the sheep on the right hand, but the goats on his left. Then shall the king say to those on his right hand, Come, you who are praised of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I hungered, and you gave me to eat. I thirsted, and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger, and you made me a companion. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry, and fed you, or thirsty, and gave you drink? And when did we see you a stranger, and entertained you, or naked, and clothed you? And when did we see you sick, or in prison, and came to you? And the king answering shall say to them, I assuredly say to you, inasmuch as you did it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. And there's a similar parable in reference to God directly, that God's like, well, if you do it to the creation, you do it to me. Then he say also to those on the left hand, Depart from me, you accursed, to the perpetual fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Different type of creation, actually, than the unfallen angels that have no gender and all that. But for I hungered, and you did not give me to eat. I thirsted, and you did not give me to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not entertain me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not entertain me. Naked, and you did not clothe me. sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Sorry, smaller print. And they shall answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungering or thirsting, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and I did not minister to you? Then he shall answer to them, saying, I assuredly say to you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of these least ones, ye did it not to me. And these shall go away in perpetual punishment, but the righteous into perpetual life. This extraordinary discourse contains statements of what was, then future, which cannot be regarded as the mere results of extraordinary sagacity, as some political men foretold the French Revolution years before it broke upon Europe. The character of the average Jewish mind and the state of feeling among the Jewish people might have led to any observant person to perceive that the fanaticism of the people was becoming frantic, and that the wild excitement which led them to persecute Jesus to the death, because he would not be a political leader against Rome, would finally dash Judaism with such violence against the ruler of the nations as to produce such results as came 40 years afterwards in the taking of the city by Titus and the dispersion of the Jewish people by Hadrian. Or you can say it was actually their lack of zeal that did this, because only the Bar Kokhba, the Bar Kokhba revolt, the son of the star, of around 70, which would have allowed Christianity to make claims that prior to that they may not have been able to make claims because certain records existed. But it was that, maybe it was because of fanaticism, but not zeal. Fanaticism as in, we want to be called Jews and we're better than everybody else because we're Jews. But yeah, they didn't really set that example, right? There were some good people amongst the mix, but here some of the details are such as one would utter had the veil of the future lifted and beheld the coming events with intense spiritual insight of an inspired seer, and yet there are none of the particularities which distinguish the predictions of the believers in a millennium, none other chiliastic, sensuous ideas. He takes the complexity of the question of his friends as the foundation of a description of the future, which embraced both the destruction of the Jewish theocracy and the final ground of judgment of men and nations. What he had said in the temple naturally led his disciples to ask for further information. He had dislocated the ideas of the government of the world. Theocracy isn't just some so-called religious people rule, or that they dictate their own wants and all that. They had not dreamed that the temple would be destroyed. There would come days of darkness, but the arrival of the Messiah would cover Mount Zion with splendor and flood the world with theocratic glory. Now he says that Judaism, with its temple, is to be swept away. What then should be their relation to the world and to God? They had reason to seek, to be taught on these points. Well, another way of fanaticism, that people act like the temple or the teacher or whatever is it. It's what's done in the temple. It's the teachings that the teacher says. So people act like, I can't do my rituals if I can't make it a temple. It's like, well, maybe it's better for you to go to the temple, but it's not, it's not that you abandon, the sacrifices or the prayers or whatever's the thing, right? Perhaps certain places or places of pilgrimage, but it's not the place. It's like in Mecca when what was it 30 years that the rock was taken from that corner, and it didn't change the pilgrimage one bit, including people still pointing to that same corner. It wasn't about the rock. I'm doing pilgrimage to the rock. It's no, it's the symbolism remained even absence of the rock. And the commandment remained even in absence of the rock. But course, in prehistoric times, well, not prehistoric times, but pre-Quranic times, there was reference to a piece being taken by Solomon, a piece being taken. The Tibetans supposedly have a piece. There's a third piece, I forget, but that's beside the point. He first warns them to beware of interpreting the pangs of childbirth into the agonies preceding death. The nations would be astir, mass physical and national upheavals would take place, but the end of the existing order of things is not yet. What men call endings are really beginnings. Deaths are births. His people, those who adopted his principles, would suffer many bitternesses. Christians should suffer especially at the hands of churchmen. The truth for which he was about to suffer death would always be an occasion of contention. There would always be the double trouble of opposing ecclesiastical influence and the distracting pretenders, the false prophets. But endurance, prudence, and vigilance would bring his followers through all troubles. Jerusalem should be certainly destroyed. A desolating abomination should stand in the holy place when the eagles of the Roman standard, who were worshipped as idols, as representing the divinity of power, should be planted in the precepts of the temple of Yahweh. You don't pronounce the J as a J, and you don't pronounce the V as a V. He gave directions to his followers. What to do then? They should flee to the mountains, probably those of Perea, any place which should take them from these horrors. That the Gospel of Matthew, which was written before the destruction of Jerusalem, by no accounts, it was, even by its own information, it just doesn't make any sense for it to be a first century gospel. Except for John, everything was, when was the first Matthew? But 120 to 150, the 120s to 150 was when Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written. John had its first version in the 90s. Appears from the fact that he calls attention to this prediction and these directions by the parentheses. Let the reader understand. The Christians subsequently obeyed these directions. There's a lot of parentheses and commas and stuff like this that don't exist in the Greek. It's just something we put in the English. And sometimes that's where they added new words or something. But you can't tell, so how... the Christians subsequently obeyed these directions. When the Roman armies encamped against Jerusalem, they fled to Pella, and thus escaped that terrible slaughter in which 1.5 million Jews are said to have fallen. If the whole Jewish populace had given up their idea of a political Messiah and yielded to the spiritual teachings of Jesus and felt that the Messiah's kingdom was inward and not outward, and abandoned all thought of attempting by the sword what was, in a way, wholly impracticable, they would have avoided that terrific catastrophe which filled the world with shudderings and to this day stands up as the bloodiest horror of the past. Now, we saw that problem in Afghanistan in a ways because they got themselves free, but they didn't hold together the kingdom. So it wasn't that they didn't have the zeal. It's just they gave, we're free from Roman rule. So, they didn't continue building up their strength and government and stuff like that. It's, and in that case, it was free from the Russian rule. And Al-Qaeda was not the terrorist organization, and it was never called such until the end of, towards the end of September 2001, which is very suspicious. And amid all commotions, when pseudo-Christ arose, the disciples of Jesus were not drawn hither and thither in vain expectation of the revelation of the Son of Man. When that really occurred, men should not have to look after it. It would force itself on the attention of all men like a lightning flash. It would fall like a thunderbolt. The disciples said, "Where, Lord?" His reply was a proverbial form of expression containing a general principle. Wherever there is a dead carcass, there the vultures do come. To keep from being eaten by birds of prey, you must keep alive. God has his scavengers everywhere. If a man die, or a nation, or a church, there are forces provided to consume the dead body and transmute it into live tissue. Judaism is dead. The wings of the vultures are abroad in the sky, and these devouring birds will scent the prey and come and take it away. From the fatal downfall of Jerusalem, the teacher ascends to the general judgment of mankind. Here, there is nothing to gratify vain curiosity. There is a graphic representation of prodigious events in nature and in human societies, ushering in what Jesus calls the parousia of the Son of Man, that is, his coming, his appearing, his revelation of himself. It may be delayed, but it will come. God works gradually forward to great results, but they often break upon the world at last, like thunderclaps. Now, the Robinson's Arch, the southeast corner of the temple wall. And let's look at it in that direction. And no, the point is not to stick your little papers of prayers inside the wall, and there's got to be people that go around and pick all that stuff up, but or perhaps it just stays there in enough quantity that the flood in the days of Noah and the rain of fire in the days of Lot are examples. The people on whom this ruin fell were years in ripening for their doom, but it fell at last like the downcoming of an enormous trip hammer. It will be so often as God shall visit the world with summary judgment. One cataclysm may succeed another, but the world does not take warning. The deluge was no lesson to Sodom and Gomorrah, nor the destruction of those cities a warning to the Jews in the days of Jesus, nor the downfall of Jerusalem and Judaism any preventative of the French Revolution. So, whatever this parousia of the Son of Man may mean, it will come suddenly, and all the development of the causes will not make men ready for the results. The race of mankind, Jesus taught, should not disappear from the earth before all the things he had predicted should come to pass. The certainty should strengthen the faith, while the suddenness should keep all who believe that Jesus is a true teacher on the spiritual alert. The words of warning, he distinctly asserts, were not confined to his immediate friends, but to all men, for they are founded on general and perpetual principles. The necessity of vigilance is illustrated further by the case of servants whose master is absent. Of the time of his return, they have no certain knowledge, but they know he will return, and they must keep in a perpetual state of readiness. This is further illustrated by the parable of 10 virgins, who, according to Oriental custom, were waiting until the bridegroom should appear, bringing his wife to his home. Well, you can think of that Kabbalistically, right? You know, you got your 10 spheres in the home through the dot or through the keter, whichever one is, the 11th. Are upon the completion of whatever, because there's that idea. It's like, well, one or the other exists, but they don't both exist. So, anyways, the point is, you can think of it in that way. Anyways, they were to add to the splendor of the procession by their torches, as is often the case in these instances. A delay keeps the bridegroom until midnight. The virgins all asleep, so that the foolish do not perceive that their lamps are dying out, nor are the wise virgins wakeful enough to warn their sisters of their danger. And so the call comes upon all suddenly. The wise have oil enough for themselves, and they properly conclude that it is better to have 5 torches burning brilliantly through the whole time of the procession than that the party should enter with 10, all of which should soon be extinguished. Trench quotes Ward, View of the Hindus, Volume 2, page 29, who describes the parts of a marriage ceremony in India, of which he was an eyewitness. He says that after waiting 2 or 3 hours at length near midnight, it was announced, as in the very words of Scripture, "Behold, the bridegroom comes. Go ye out to meet him." All the persons employed now lighted their lamps and ran with them in their hands to fill up their stations in the procession. Some of them had lost their lights and were unprepared, but it was then too late to seek them, and the cavalcade moved forward. Now, that can be metaphorical, something, right? Think of that. Some time after dusk, which, after saying your dusk prayers, even in the group, you go off and take care of your marital duties, and then then it's time to get some sleep or something. Or it's time to wash up and come out for midnight rituals that are available some places, or were available at the time. So it can be metaphorical of that. And also of the night. Yeah, but anyways, they represent things without being so explicit, right? He thus teaches personal responsibility and necessity of ceaseless vigilance. Jesus sets forth himself as representative of humanity. Humanity shall be judged by him in both senses. His moral sense is the standard of judgment. Whatever injury is done to any human being, however feeble, friendless, uninfluential, apparently worthless, is to bring to the injurer just what act this would bring if done to Jesus. Now, in some cases, there's still the announcement that the marriage has been consummated. So, yeah. He is the Son of humanity. Hurt. And you do good to him. Wait, what? Oh, hurt humanity and you hurt him. Do good to humanity at any point, and you do good to him. Water to any thirsty man, bread to any hungry woman, clothing any naked child, kind attention to any unknown stranger, visit to any prisoner, criminal, or innocent is set down as done to the Son of Man. Well, because see, the Son of Man, or the intelligence of God, we say Son of God, but there's really that meaning, the pure, productive one of God. The influence, the prophets get credit for what their community does, because of their influence. And anybody gets credit for their legacy of influence. He refuses to have anything which the giver is not willing to bestow upon humanity. He takes the lowliest human being, whoever he or she may be, and says, "Inasmuch as you did it not to this least one, you did it not to me." Any failure of duty to any human being that Jesus takes as a personal neglect of himself, while he acknowledges as a personal favor the slightest kindness done to the most nearly insignificant human being. And as we've pointed out before, we can say that Jesus, his doctrine is of the one who sent him. And people who understand it in that context, unless it's phrased the mention of the Son of Man, I guess, but again, he's supposed to be quoting God, is the idea. This is the most sublime and tender humaneness. It is to be remarked how, in the setting forth of the doctrine of future rewards and punishments, the goodness of the Heavenly Father is presented by Jesus. So, again, the metaphor of heaven is the beyond, Father as in a separate from our generation. From the foundation of the world, a state of exaltation has been prepared for all the good. God does not make devils and bad people and hells. Well, hells, yes. Angels make themselves devils. Well, the gendered ones can. The sons of God may make themselves bad people. Wickedness may make hells, but God makes only kingdoms of glory and angels and sons of God. He does all he can to keep angels, well, remember, children of gender neutrally, but you don't have to say bent every time to understand that we're talking about the males and females of the group, but he does all he can to keep angels from becoming devils and men from becoming bad, and high celestial places from becoming infernal pits. He uses all possible attractions to keep men from going away from him. He does not curse them, but they are accursed. He does not drive them away, but they do depart. To be a man, one must have a free will. To be a son of God and made in the likeness of God, one must be as free as God. Well, who can deny that any of these figures, Jesus included, had limited free will? Because he's like, well, I don't know the hour. I can't take the cup from me. It's up to you. Does not every man who reflects and examines his consciousness feel sure that he is, when a man chooses to put himself in such position that the attraction of hell becomes greater than the attraction of heaven, he gravitates naturally towards hell. And yet, there is nothing dogmatic in all this wonderful discourse. Okay? Dogmatic isn't whether you like it or whether it seems difficult or whatever. It's you're adhering to some sort of belief or principle or something. And if one doesn't know all the information, one's just taking other people's words for it, it's, further strengthens that accusation of dogmaticism upon it, but which isn't necessarily right or wrong. But, there is no question of curiosity settled, no question the answer to which could have no bearing on the moral character of men. No subscription to formal creeds secures the final benediction, but only such belief as is the necessary root of the moral tree which bears the fruits of humanity is saving. God's discriminations here are made in regard to character, and so will be the discriminations of the other world. Jesus sets himself forward as the representatives of humanity, while he is the judge of mankind. Such belief in him as that representative as shall lead to such love for him as shall produce on all possible occasions all possible kindnesses to all kinds of men. It is that belief which keeps a man in the circle of the humane, and the humane are those who are drawn closely to Jesus, the Son of Man, and thus to one another. As humanity dies out of man, devilishness sets in. Jesus recognizes the existence of a personal devil. Men in every act become more and more like one or the other, like Jesus or the devil. There are judgments from time to time on earth. There are to be judgments in the future, the details of which are not furnished, but in the general terms of appalling grandeur, these judgments are described. One of these temporal judgments of men should be had at the destruction of Jerusalem, the horrors of which should typify another, a spiritual, a grander judgment on a broader scale. That stupendous event should have no effect upon the character of those whose sentence it should pronounce, but that the character should determine the sentence. It is said that there are pre-destruction of the temple gospels, but none of them talk about the temple, none of them quite go to the point where the temple will be destroyed and all that stuff. Do they? But I mean, it doesn't come off like a prediction, like it does in the canonical gospels that were written afterwards. It shall go away the righteous, that is the humane, into continual life, the wicked, that is the inhumane, into continual punishment. He does not tell us how long this punishment, how long that punishment and that life shall be. He uses a word, aionios, which specially conceals any definite conclusion. It may be endless, it may have an end, it may be immediate, and to continue through the existing state of things, it is pain and pleasure set over against one another with no limit of time. Time, measureless or limited, is very little, but character is everything. Now, one of the things that we find in some of these things is the reference that people say to prophecy. I think when we get outside the canonical biblical text, it's further emphasized that it's more about what it's doing to you, what it's the mystical connection, and what you're supposed to do in life and how you're supposed to relate to others. That's more important than this predictive state. And some things don't really come out as external prophecies in some of these other texts that seem like. But there's a lot of biblical text, like Daniel and some others, that are not only rewrites of other stuff, but that they weren't written to predict what it said they were written to predict, because those things had already happened years before these texts were written in the earliest forms.